to welcome everybody to our webinar today on managing stress and overwork in post MCO academic life. So, for the past 3 months or so, many of us have actually been trying to handle both the staying at home, trying to figure out the COVID-19 pandemic, trying to balance working at home, and also finding out that actually work from home and MCO probably brings a lot more work than what we are actually already used to, although I think all of us are already working quite hard even before the MCO. So we're very, very fortunate, very, very lucky today that we have Prof. Amir or Dr. Ame Siddiq Amin Nordin with us here today. So Prof. Ame is an associate professor in psychiatry at the University of Malaya. He is also the director for Cares, or the Center for Community Engagement and Sustainability, and also the chief coordinator for Center for Addiction Sciences. So Prof. Amir's specialty is actually in addiction, particularly nicotine addiction. But he is also, of course, a psychiatrist and very much an advocate for mental health. So he will be speaking to us today about our mental health and the MCO. He is no stranger to speaking to the public. He is a regular in basically all the local television stations, TV3, Bernama TV, Astro TV, you name it. And he's also a regular at the radio stations, BFM 89.9 and Era, among just a few of them. And of course, he is also pretty famous on Instagram and social media. So I'm sure that many of you have also seen him and read his work and listened to him. So it's really great that now we are actually able to host him at ADAC for University of Malaya. So I'm very, very excited for that. So without further ado, once again, thank you so much to Prof. Ame, and I'll hand this session over to you. So over to you, Prof. Ame.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you can actually hear me. That's the first thing. So what I'm going to be doing, because the use of this Google Meet, from my experience, is that once we go on live, I can't see anybody but myself. So it's going to be one of those very interesting experiences. So, if you can't hear me, then, somebody just, shout out, or if you can't see me, then also just shout out. If not, I'll be really talking to myself when we start.
Don't worry, Prof. Ame, I'll take care of the shouting out. So as long as I don't shout out, then definitely we can see you.
Okay, so I'm going to start now. Okay, great. So first of all, welcome to everyone, particularly those from outside of the University of Malaya. I actually wasn't prepared emotionally and mentally for a crowd that's outside of the university. However, I think it's relevant for most of us here on working in academia, and we'll see how it goes. So again, I'm taking into consideration that the audience that I'm actually having here are probably quite used to managing some level of stress. But what I hope to impart is that the stress that you might be feeling at this point of time is a little bit different from the stress that we're often dealt with in the past because of the unprecedented situation that we're all in. So the talk that I'm going to be giving is going to be about managing stress and overwork in the post-MCO academic life. And what I wanted to do first is actually thank all of you here, most of you here who've actually been probably working at home or working from home and staying at home for most of the movement control order and the extended movement control orders. I wanted to thank all of you on behalf of the frontliners, who are most of us in the medical profession, for that sacrifice, because I think we are not going to be where we are without the help from everyone of you to stay at home during that period when we were asked and requesting people to stay at home. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start this little journey with the story of a person, and let's just call him or her Professor X, just to give you a bit of context on the discussion that we're going to have today. So Professor X appears to be a senior professor who enjoys coming to work daily. This person is a leader in the field with a number of years behind his or her back of teaching, and often the when we're talking about teaching, when we ask this individual, he says that he teaches the way that it should be taught. Yeah. So he's a recipient of a lab where this person also has postgraduate and undergraduate studies. Yeah. So then, during the March 18th, the movement control order was announced, and this Professor X ended up about a month later being at home, literally living with, in this case, it's a her with her husband, and she had some children, but they were all overseas. And during that period of time when we were all at home, she was asked to teach and also meet, but it was to be done online. She was also denied entry into labs, and the students that she had under her, both postgraduate and undergraduates, were also not in campus as they've been asked to go home. Yeah, this person, because being a senior professor, probably is not that young, has some medical comorbidity. So I'm just giving you a context of a person that you might know, or if you're in that age group, it might be you. We can change the person to be a little bit younger, where the children are at home. But essentially, the story is a story of one of us. So after a month of being at home, you can imagine some of the trials and tribulations that we've already had. There's going to be a bit of frequent arguments with the husband. In this case, this person was feeling isolated. Remember, the children are overseas, and she's only got one husband, which she's starting to argue with. She's starting to be a bit anxious about her health because she's reading quite a lot about the COVID and the experience that we all had in seeing the numbers rise over the course of the month post movement control order. She wanted to do a lot of work, but work was actually very slow. We might have felt that as well. She was actually very frustrated with her work progress, and she was really struggling with technology. Remember, I said that she was one of those people who actually mentioned that, we teach the way it should be taught, and which means that she's a bit reluctant to be, assimilated with technology much earlier on. But as we've felt and experienced over the last 2 or 3 months, that if you're computer illiterate, you really suffer during this period of the MCO. She's unmotivated because she was asked to do things that she's not good at, and there's no one really to ask for help. And at the same time, she's losing her sense of self because she comes to work daily. There is no work to come to daily at this point of time because you're working at home. So listening to that short brief, I just wanted to ask everyone here to reflect on yourself. How did you feel listening to that story? Again, like I shared with you, this person could be a little bit younger. She could or he could have children at home, but essentially this person is an academic with the same academic situation and feelings that you could probably imagine as I was sharing with you the story. So if you reflect about that, if you felt about that the person was feeling frustrated, angry, depressed, isolated, or if you could relate to that story, then more likely than not, you have actually experienced some level of mental health distress over the course of that month that we were in the movement control order. So what I'm going to be doing today over the next, hopefully about 35 to 40 minutes, because I really want to take questions from all of you here, if you have any, I'm going to share with you a little bit about mental health and why we think it's important. I also want to share about the most common mental health issue, which is stress. I want to differentiate between stress, distress, and impairment. And I think what's most important is that I want to also impart some practical tips in managing stress, particularly what I think is for academics that have struggled quite a bit during this period of time. And then, like I said, I really want to make sure that we've got some time for question and answer. So just going back on the practical tips for managing stress, if we have some time, I would also like to do a practical session with all of you here. And I saw that there were not many of us here, which is great, because then it's a bit easier to coordinate once we get to that particular point. Like I said, at this point of time, as I'm presenting to you, I have no clue whatsoever whether anybody is out there, because the way that Google Meet works is that you only see your screen. So first of all, just to share with you, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. It's really important for us to take note of this, because if an individual has a physical disability or a problem, then that person is considered to be unhealthy. If the person is starting to struggle in his social or her social setting, then that person is also deemed to be unhealthy. And finally, if the person has some mental distress, whatever the cause might be, then that person is also deemed to be unhealthy. But what is this thing called mental health that we need to ensure that we've got some level of good in it so that we're considered to be healthy? We know that for health, in terms of physical health, it's quite clear cut. Social well-being is a little bit gray as well, but mental health is equally as gray, and we want to have a little bit of understanding about that. So first of all, mental health is actually that state of well-being where the individual is actually able to assess and also understand his ability to reach his full potential. This is important because if you're unable to reach your full potential due to the issues relatable to that, which is number one, the ability to manage stressful behaviors and signs and symptoms, to be able to work productively, to be able to provide back to society. Therefore, this individual might be considered to be mentally unhealthy. And again, we're not talking about mental illness, we're talking about mental health issues, which 29.2% of Malaysians are considered to be struggling with based on the latest census in 2015. Yeah. So this is the state of the situation at this point of time. Now, mental health is important in various stages of life because, as I've mentioned just now, it helps you to reach your full potential. Now, for us, most of us here, we're probably going to be in the working life era. And therefore, having good mental health allows us to work productively, to be in optimum in the field that we are at, or the specialty that we are doing, and of course to provide some level of comfort to those around us as we give back to society in the ways that we do. So these are some of the reasons why it's really important for us to have good mental health. Now, I'm just going to share with you again very briefly about the components of good mental health. You can see that the first thing is the ability to manage stress. The ability to have a good diet, to exercise, to adapt to new skills, to have social support, and of course the prevention or the distaste of drug use allows an individual to actually function in good mental health. Yeah. But at the same time, we are exposed to a situation where stress appears to be the most common mental health issue that one can actually face. And again, stress in itself is just the normal reaction towards any change. And that's very important for us to take note. Any change, especially like the one that we've experienced during this pandemic period, is going to lead us to feel some level of stress. And stress could be physical, mental, or emotional, and it could be good or bad. So we often talk about the good parts of stress, where if you can think about your situation when you were doing your PhD, I suspect most of us here have a PhD, or doing a master's or training to become an academic. An individual, if there is no assessment, will often feel kind of disinterested or without the ability to push themselves. But as the stress level starts to peak, the individual will start to become a little bit more motivated and focused, and then of course will reach to the optimum level. Now, if this person is then pushed with enough stress that is, too much for the individual to take, which is chronic stress, then we will see that that individual will start to go towards the second part of the curve, which is where that person starts to get exhausted and eventually starts to have some level of impairment. Now, I just wanted to again highlight in terms of the use of the traffic light system, we want to be in the green part of stress, which is the optimum level or the good or the positive stress. We want to avoid being in the yellow and definitely not in the red part of stress, because in the yellow and the red part of stress, it's often going to lead to some level of impairment or some level of functional loss that we would like to avoid. So these are sort of the principles of stress that we'll be dealing with today, yeah? So you probably are aware, and if you're not aware, I'm just going to remind you again a little bit about the symptoms that you might face being in about physical stress. You're going to have things like dizziness, headaches. Often individuals might actually have palpitations. They might actually feel cold and clammy. So these are going to be the physical symptoms or signs that you might be having some level of stress, particularly if there is a change involved. Now, at the same time, individuals might also have psychological symptoms. They might feel angry or depressed or unmotivated or worried. So these are again relatable when you have some level of change. So if you're reflecting back to yourself and you're thinking about that period when we were all having the movement control order, you might have actually experienced some of these symptoms. Now, during the post movement control order, we probably might see some of the behavioral symptoms coming back. Individuals starting to avoid coming to work, individuals being either absent or present but unable to function. We call that presentism. And in fact, in terms of the cost of loss for business, particularly the business that we are doing as well in academia, presentism is actually more expensive compared to absenteeism because you might be actually distressed and struggling, but actually not finding the help that you need to be able to be productive. So these are some of the symptoms and signs that individuals get when they're dealing with stress. Now, the causes of stress can be various. And again, I just wanted to highlight that, we often say that sometimes the stress is because of the individual. It's not true. The causes of stress are various. It could be an individual issue. It can be your reaction towards friends and family. It could be the work and the work environment that you're in, or it could be miscellaneous, the various life situations that you've put yourself or that you might be exposed to. And if we think about ourselves and the issues that we have faced during that period of the movement control order and the post-movement control order, there are many reasons and causes that might lead us to have stressful situations. And if we're unable to manage this stress, we will then eventually have distress, and as I'll share with you later, lead to some level of impairment if we don't deal with it quickly. So just to give you a little bit of a insight about what we're going to be discussing a little bit more after this. Think about personal issues, for example. If you're struggling financially at this point of time, I'm pretty sure you're going to have some level of distress. And this happens quite a bit to our colleagues who are actually contract workers. If the university itself doesn't provide some level of leadership, whichever university or institution that you're in, by actually giving you clear guidance on what to do and what not to do, there might be some level of distress. Yeah. If you're going to have people in your family that have started to lose jobs, I was just reading just now that about 42% of us have lost or going to lose our jobs in Q1. So you're going to have some level of change, and this will also lead to stress as well. So there are various causes of stress that might actually cause individuals to feel the way that they're feeling at this point of time. Yeah. So if your stress level is more than your ability to cope, and this is where it's important for us to take note. If your stress level is more than your ability to cope, either the methods that you have are not working anymore, or there's just too much demands put upon you, then individuals might eventually have problems with their stress, which we then consider to be distress. Yeah. And if these individuals are then exposed to some level or more of this distress, they will eventually lead to impairment. So we can see that if we don't manage our stress very well, we can actually have multiple medical complications as a result of stress, which could be both physical and psychological. Yeah. So more common side effects of stress that we often talk about are going to be cardiovascular problems or heart diseases. Often we're going to have issues with the risk of diabetes if you have that risk on you. And on the psychological aspects of it, the ones that are often cited is going to be depression and anxiety. So these are going to be very much sensitive to if the demands put upon you are beyond your ability to cope, then therefore these medical problems might suddenly manifest themselves. And we see quite a number of these individuals coming forward during this period of MCO and also this current period of the extended movement control order as well. Yeah. As I've shared with you just now, if the stress is not managed, it can lead to distress and eventually to impairment. So what is the situation like during this period of the MCO? I know most of us here are researchers and we really like to get data. I'm not going to be sharing with you so much validated data, but these are some of the signals and signs, I think, that gives us a little bit of an idea of the situation. So I consult for befrienders, and they've actually come up with this little survey during the MCO, where they ask a number of Twitter poll people, how are they feeling at this point of time? And this to me just represents young Malaysians during this period of the MCO. And you can see on your right, if you're seeing the same screen as I'm seeing right now, that a number of people were already reporting fear, anxiety, and also helplessness and hopelessness. And if you look to your left over there, some people had also contemplated harm. Again, take this with a grain of salt because these could be people that are already contacting befrienders, but it gives you a little bit of an idea of the situation during that period of time. Now, during this period of the MCO, I actually worked with the Center.my, or Center, which is an independent research center in the country. And we did a survey of about 1,500 people around the third week of the MCO. So what we found was that a number of Malaysians, and this was mostly in the Klang Valley, looking about 40% of them were B40, and the rest of them were about M40, T20, around this area, which showed that about 35 to about 49 or 8% of them were already reporting high levels of negative emotions, which includes stress and also anxiety and depression. So this again shows that during this period of the MCO, that if you were feeling stress, independent of your job and role, even if you didn't have any work at that point of time, or that you were just doing the stuff that you were doing, most of us were feeling some level of change, which resulted in that feeling of stress and distress during that period of time of the MCO. And we can see this has not been any different from our other countries. So one of them I just wanted to cite here is in America. But also the same kind of data was shown in Australia and the UK during this period of the MCO. So what we can gather here is that during this period of time, individuals were feeling the change, and some of us, if not most of us, or at least half of us, were actually feeling some level of stress, and some of us also had more problems compared to that during this period of time. Yeah. So looking at stress here, one of the more common issues that we might face if we don't deal with this stress is going to be burnt out. And I purposely want to put this in through because we're using Google Meet, but some of us have been using Zoom over the last 3 months. And there's this idea now that you could be zoomed out. There's also this idea that during this period of the MCO, if you're working at home, and I don't call it working from home, and I'll share with you why. If you're working at home, you're more likely to feel some level of burnt out, particularly around the time of now, because the situation was so different compared to before that we're exhibiting symptoms of emotional exhaustion. Some of you might feel emotionally exhausted. Some of you even might feel nauseated looking at these webinars already. Some of you might actually feel a little bit alienated or further away from the jobs that you're actually doing. So as I mentioned just now, I'm dealing with a bunch of academics over here. We feel that our work is on research and teaching, but sometimes we feel that we're a bit further from that because of the working at home situation that we're all in. And definitely, if you compare your output compared to 2019 around the same time, and this is how we do a year-on-year comparison, you might also have a reduction in your performance during this period of time. And I think it's relevant for us to think about this, because if we're not careful, when we go back to normal, then we're going to have trouble in actually getting back the motivation and momentum that we've already lost over the last 3 months. So some of the causes of burnt out, and I wanted to particularly highlight the ones I think are relevant to us, and this is the ones I put in the box, is the sense of the lack of control. We were imposed a situation to work at home on the 18th, and we were not normally ready for working at home prior to this. There was a little bit of unclearness in what we're expected to do, particularly when some of us were asked to do online teaching and meets. Again, not all of us here are computer or technology savvy, so some of us might have struggled a little bit more than others. Some of us also felt that the job fit was actually a little bit different. The roles that you had, I shared with you Professor X, who has a lab with postgraduate, undergraduate, and now maybe asked to do online teaching when that person might not be ready, or the field that person is in is difficult to do this particular work, might also feel some level of disengagement with the work because of that. And of course, the lack of social support, be it from friends and family. Again, thinking about yourself, if your family is not an academic, they won't actually understand the struggles that you're facing over the last 2 or 3 months during the MCO and the early stages of the EMCO. So if you're feeling those kind of feelings as a result of that, there's a likelihood that you might be in the yellow territory of the traffic light system that we shared just now, in the area of distress. And I think it's important for us to take note of that, because if you're in the yellow area of distress as a result of the excessive demands put upon you, either by yourself or your organization, there's lots that we can actually do to prevent us from having the red part of the traffic light, which is impairment. So being on the middle of distress, if you do certain things like managing the stress, increasing the coping experience and repertoire of things that you can do, you can actually move back towards the green area of stress and hopefully avoid having burnt out. But if you don't take care of yourself and you leave yourself in the areas of burnt out, then individuals might be impaired. And if you're impaired, one of the psychological consequences is going to be mental illness. And this is a situation where that person is unable to function and requires further intervention from a professional because that person is just unable to cope. And we're not seeing many of these people, but there have been a few that have come forward during this period of time of the MCO as a result of the changes that they've been having during this MCO, particularly those in private. So I know I've seen some people coming out from the university. If you're an academic from the private setting, there are also challenges that you're facing that might be a little bit different. For example, without students in the campus, there's a problem with fees. And as a result of that, some of you might be having pay cuts or also having trouble in maintaining your employment as a result of these new changes that have happened. For us in the public setting, it's going to be the issues I've shared with you just now, where you might not be able to adjust as quickly compared to other colleagues in your role, and therefore over the last 2 or 3 months, you've been struggling to complete your online courses, you've been struggling to be relevant within your department or your organization, which of course will lead you to have increased levels of stress, especially considering the situation of the future that we all know is going to happen. So I just wanted to then now focus in view of the time as well to management or stress management techniques that I think we can all take. Now, I wanted to go back to the unique situation that all of us as academics have, particularly for us in the University of Malaya, being in management myself, by the 31st of December 2020, irrespective of whatever you've done, or irrespective of the COVID that's happened from March to around now, we still have to report on our research, teaching, and service. So already now it's June. Some of us, if you're reflecting about this, you might be wondering, how are you going to achieve the deliverables that you have to achieve moving forward? And of course, if you're struggling already since March, then this becomes even an enormous task. We are also having the problem at this point of time to be working at home. I say it's working at home opposed to working from home because my understanding of working from home is a control situation. Whereas working at home, it was sort of imparted on us rather quickly over a period of 2 days. Some of us went home thinking that this is going to be a short stint. Do not bring your computer back. Did not bring your relevant material back, and then you were not allowed to go back into your office. So you've been having to make do with the situation at home. Secondly, as well, when you're working at home, not everyone has the same living arrangements. We did another study looking at the living arrangements as well and how your levels of stress would increase or decrease as a result of that. And what we found was that number one, your space or the available space for you determines your stress level. That's to be expected. What we did not expect was who was in your house also determines your stress level. So if you're alone, you're going to be more stressful, comparable to those who are living with intergenerational people in your house. So if you had mom and dad, some children in between, and maybe a grandma, then you're going to be more stressed compared to if you just had your immediate nucleus family, i.e. your husband and wife and your children together with you. So those who are isolated, single individuals, for example, were going to report a higher level of stress, probably because of the isolation that they face. Apart from most of them were also living in single rooms as opposed to houses, and this might have increased their levels of stress at that point. So working at home as opposed to working from home, of course, is a unique situation that we had. And of course, we've got this online teaching and learning, which, like I said, I've been using Zoom, I've been using Google Meets, I've been using Teams. I suspect all of us here have had the same experience. At one point, doing some media work, they also asked me to go on Skype and use some other funny thing that I don't even remember what the name is now. So all of us have been trying and testing the various types of technology that we've had. Some of us have been doing teaching using PowerPoint, where you might have learned from ADAC how to record your PowerPoint. Some of you might not have thought that it's important, and then having to deal with PowerPoint presentations, or not wanting to use PowerPoints if you're a mathematician, fundamental math, for example. How do you do PowerPoints for those kind of situations? So there's a lot of issues in the field that we're in and the technology that we have available for us at home at that point of time. So if you're in the office, maybe you might have all the gadgets and gizmos, but if you're at home and you are locked down for at least 8 weeks of that period, that's all you have. So you've got to make do with that. And of course, for some of us who are managers, either you have a research group, either you're a member of a center or you're a leader within your profession, the head of department or head of unit. You've got people you've got to manage who are particularly engaged with students and teaching, but there's none of them there. Yeah, so you have an added situation of having to manage these particular situations. So of course, it's going to lead to quite a number of stressful moments for some of you, and some of you might have already struggled during this period of time. So what are the management tips that I could give to you that you can take home? If you don't know them already, I'm going to share you again. I've broken them down into P's and 4 M's. And I wanted to share with you specific tips on all of this, which you can take on board, particularly if you've not thought about this. Again, these tips allows you to move from yellow to green. If you think that you're already in red of the traffic light system of impairment, you're unmotivated, you're having trouble regulating your mood, you are unproductive, you are struggling emotionally and physically over the last couple of weeks to months, I think you should already be seeking help from a professional at this point of time. But if you're starting to feel a bit disengaged, unproductive, but it's cyclical, more relevant to the work, you might be experiencing burnt out. And if you're even earlier than that, maybe a little bit light yellow, not moving towards orange yet, you're feeling a little bit apprehensive, anxious, distressed when you're dealt with work, but you can still do it, but you're struggling with it. Doing stress management tips allows you to move back towards green. because and this is where the area where individuals are more productive and at their optimum level of productivity. So the first thing that I always impart with individuals is that you've got to maintain your physical health. So if you're like Professor X with medical comorbidities, make sure that you manage your medical comorbidities well. If you have diabetes, make sure that you eat your medications. Make sure that you take care of yourself. If you've got a previous history of a heart disease, make sure that you're taking care of your heart health well. That's the first thing, yeah? Second is for you to eat a balanced diet. I know it's sometimes obvious, but trust me, not many people are doing it, particularly if you're talking about sugar and high fat meals. The reason being is that if you're at risk for developing mental health issues, including mood and anxiety symptoms, what you take in makes a big difference. If you take in high sugar diets, you're going to have a peak in your mood and then it's going to crash when your sugar levels drop. If you're highly into fat and savory foods, you might feel sluggish and that sluggishness might last a bit longer. So it's really important in what you consume as well in managing your mental health during this period of time. Now, I can't stress further about sleep. And if you remember when we first had the MCO period, I'm pretty sure some of you thought that this might have been an early Hari Raya. We are now post Hari Raya already, but you might have thought it was an earlier Hari Raya by about 2 months, and you might have binged on Korean drama maybe during that period of time. I definitely know that during this period, I was introduced to something called Netflix, and it's become a bane in my life because once you've started, it's very difficult to stop. But what I wanted to share with you is that during that period of time, you might have binged on these things and your whole sleep cycle would have actually gone tipsy-turvy. And you've got to now regulate it all back as we move towards some level of new normal. Yeah. And of course, you've got to make sure that you exercise, and most of us were not doing that. So these are the elements of peace that I just wanted to share. Now, at the same time, when you're feeling that level of stress and distress, not many of us had methods to actually relax. Some of us might have done something that they thought might be useful. Some of us might not have had the coping skills that others have, and they might have struggled a little bit. So having some level of relaxation exercise might be useful. And one of them that has been often cited is something called mindfulness. So we're moving towards the 4 M's now, yeah? Having the ability and the discipline to do self-care is also really important. And also having that altruistic motive or that meaningful engagement in the work that you're doing is also imperative. Knowing why you were asked to stay at home makes a huge difference in how you manage that 8 weeks that we were asked to stay at home. Knowing why we decided to join academia helps us to manage the difficulties that we're facing at this point of time. If you don't have that bigger meaning, it makes it difficult for you to adapt to the situation that is fluid and ever-changing at this point of time. So these are some of the basic principles of stress management that I can share with you. I wanted to highlight here in terms of sleep, like I shared with you just now, and I wanted you to focus particularly at items number 1, which is to establish a regular bedtime sleeping habit. That's the first thing. The second one is I want you to focus on number 10, which is to reserve the room that you decide to sleep specifically for sleep. Because these are going to be the two elements that I think is really important for you to maintain good sleeping habits moving forward. And of course, you're going to have these 10 other items. And again, don't worry, I'm going to be sharing this with ADAC later on as a handout, and then you can actually take this and look at it back again for you to think about how you're going to manage your stress moving forward from here onwards. Yeah. So establishing a good sleeping routine is really, really important. Yeah. And the final one that I wanted to share with you is going to be on self-care. So these are any activities that are specifically targeted for you to maintain some level of physical, mental, and social well-being. And they could be anything that you enjoy. There must be something you enjoy that you put in order to break from the chronic stress that you're exposed to because of the work, and the ever-changing situation that you're in. So having these breaks in between during the course of a week, for example, allows you to maintain some level of stress reduction during this period of time. Yeah. And I think it's very important for me to stress that this is something that you need to do regularly. Yeah. And you've got to pick something that you enjoy. It's not just about tangkap muat, thinking whatever you think that you can do. It's actually enjoying something and sticking to it during periods of time where you put it into your slot. Yeah. So if you like cycling, for example, making sure that you make time for it, irrespective of how busy you might be. If spiritual health is part of your self-care, making sure that you put meditation and religious obligations that might be helpful in that period of time. If journaling or writing is the thing for you, making sure that you put that time in during your busy schedule, because this really prevents you from moving from the yellow to orange to red on that spectrum of the traffic light system. So some specific tips for colleagues here, for us in academia. I think what's most important is during the MCO and moving towards the post-MCO, we are having a problem with autonomy loss. There are lots of things that are ever-changing. Remember, going back to Professor X, this individual might be us. We like to go to work at a certain time. We like to see our students at a certain time. We have certain set routines that we have known as an academic for yonks, yeah? But that's all changed. We might be meeting our students now online. It might not be in the specific time as we want it to be. So setting a routine is extremely important. Second is that if you're looking at tips for working at home or working from home, my colleagues in UM Cares have actually put a nice little bite-sized tips that you can actually take on our website or our Facebook page or Instagram page where you can actually look. Again, ensuring the 4 M's that I shared with you just now is important. Mindfulness or relaxation exercise. Secondly, is going to be about, what do you call this? Mastery or having self-care. Movement, which is exercise. And of course, the final one is having meaningful engagement in the work that you do. The final one here is actually, or the third one here is actually know where to find help. I think this is really important for you to manage your stress. Because as I've shared with you, if you're on the red side of the stress element or distress or impairment, you're probably needing some professional help. And of course, these other things I think are quite important for us in managing, adapting to new skills, modifying or reducing screen time. And I don't think it's less important now for us to think about financial health. For some of us here who might be a bit lucky than others that have a bit more to save. But if you're not, or you're having family members that are struggling, it's really important for us to manage our financial health, because it will be your mental health problem in the coming 6 months to 1 year as the country goes into recession. I'm not going to be glazing over it, because that's the reality that we're faced with at this point of time. Yeah. So if you look at, if you're going to think about 3 things that I think are really important for us as academics, I think these are probably the 3 things that we can take home. Now, there was a BFM comment that was just given about 2 or 3 days ago by a colleague of ours saying that there was no access to help during the period of the MCO. I would like to refute that, because from the very get-go, there was already a lot of information that was put across by the university, particularly to get some level of assistance, particularly if you're struggling in the yellow and orange zone. If you're in the red zone, of course, you know where to find us in the hospital, but there were systems that you should or would like to know about how to access help within this particular organization. So I just wanted to share that out, and if you wanted more information about this, then just pop me some questions later, and we'll take it from there. Yeah. So so I'm going to end with this last particular input here, and I'm going to glaze through this a bit quickly because I want to do it practically with you in the remaining time that we've got. Yeah. So what I want you to do is I want to share with you one particular relaxation exercise that I think is useful and really important. It will be one of the 4 M's that I shared with you just now. And this is what I call the relaxation or the breathing exercises. This is probably going to be the building blocks of any other relaxation exercise that you're going to be having to do. So what I want you to all do after this, and I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment, because I want to see all of you and I want to share with you how it's done. So let's see if I can get back to the screen. Um, okay, sorry. Okay, great. So I don't know whether you can see me. I suspect you can. I don't
Uh,
know.
yes, we can see you, Dr. Amir.
Okay, I'm just gonna again sort of change the layout because I can't see myself. Spotlight tu, ke tilted? Okay,
Um,
anyway. Wow, tiba-tiba ada 38 people here. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to share with you how we're going to do this breathing exercises, and I would like all of you to do so. So you can do it either standing up or sitting down. I know you're at your home, your office. It's up to you how you do it. I'm trying to find how to see myself because then I can't actually see what I'm doing for my own self. Sekejap, eh. Let's see whether if I put it in auto, what happens. Okay, anyways, I don't know what I've done. Okay, I can see myself now. Okay, so, okay, it's a bit hard because myself is only half. If I stand up, you probably can see me a little bit more. So what I want you to do first is I want you to put one hand on the chest and one hand on the tummy, yeah? Again, I'm just assuming that all of you are doing this. I want you to put one hand on the chest and one hand on the tummy. I don't mind whether you're sitting or whether you're standing. If you're lying down, it's going to be a little bit difficult to see me, yeah? So I want you to take a deep breath in and out as normal and just feel how your chest and your tummy are actually moving. So when you're breathing normally, you'll realize that your chest will come up and down and your tummy won't move a lot. Yeah? This is just normal breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. What we're wanting to do is we want to do deep breathing, which is tummy breathing. Yeah? We want the tummy to actually move at some point. So what I normally do in this scenario is I actually go for, and you might have read that there's 8, 7, 5. It's just so difficult for you to think about. I go for 5, 5, 5. Yeah, 5 inhalation of the breath through the nose, 5 holding your breath, and then 5 expiring it through the mouth. Yeah. And what I want you to do as you're doing that is take note of how your chest and your tummy is actually taking the breath in, yeah? So what you're wanting is your chest to come up, your tummy will come in, and then as you're taking more of the breath in, your tummy will come out. That's relaxation in the tummy breathing, yeah? And then of course, when you hold it and when you're expiring, you notice your chest will come down and your tummy will come in and out again. Okay, so we're going to do that together. So again, one hand on the chest, one hand on the tummy. So take a deep breath on 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hold it on 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then expire on 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's just a warm up, yeah. So at least you have a rough idea what you need to do. Okay, so I'm gonna take off my jacket because suddenly it's getting a bit warm. All right. So again, hand on chest, hand on tummy. Yeah. So on 5, take a deep breath on 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hold it on 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then expire on 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I want you to put another, I'm going to tell you another instruction. Now all of you close your eyes, okay, and just listen to my voice. So now take a deep breath in on 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and hold it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and expire. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah? Let's just do that one more time. Close your eyes, keep it closed. Take a deep breath in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and expire. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. So I just wanted to share with you what we've done. You can take off your open your eyes now. Sorry. So what I wanted to share with you just now is that we've actually done about a minute's worth of relaxation breathing exercises together. That's what we've actually done. Because 5, 5, 5 is 15 seconds. We've done it 4 times. That's a minute. So often, if you do it for about 5 minutes, then you'll come to a state of relaxation. And especially if you're going to close your eyes and you're going to be focused to the present and not allow the thoughts that are in your head to influence your thoughts, you're going to allow them to be there and go away. you're actually doing the early steps of mindfulness. Yeah, so that's why I said that breathing exercises without thinking about the situation, just thinking about the breathing itself is one form of relaxation. But if you take a little bit of time to read about mindfulness, you'll notice that by mastering breathing exercises, you're already on the first step towards mindfulness. And as I shared with you just now, mindfulness is one of the more important or evidence based methods to also have relaxation, particularly for stress management. And it's actually quite difficult to actually do. But I just wanted to share with you that you're at least halfway there. Yeah. So that's the first thing. And again, as I shared, you can do it with your eyes closed. You can do it with your eyes open. You can do it in the office. You can do it at home. You can do it standing up, sitting down, or even lying. Yeah. So there are various methods for you, but that's just one take-home. What do you call this? Skill that I hope would be quite useful for you moving forward. Yeah. So let's see if I can finally find my slide again. Great. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. So since we're sort of coming to the end here, I just wanted to. Okay. Sorry. So again, I just wanted to share with you here. Yeah. You can do it sitting down, um, standing up, or actually sitting. And like I shared with all of you just now, I'm going to be passing this to ADAC, and then I suspect that all of you who have registered can get in touch with ADAC, and then you'll be able to get the handouts that I'll be providing at the end to ADAC, so that they will have this particular thing there, and you can actually then continue that conversation. So I think with that, I'm going to end here. And if there's any questions, you can email me if you like, or you can find me on social media. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the chat situation, and we can take some questions if you have any of them there. If you have questions that you'd like to voice out, we can take some of those questions before we end today. So I think with that, thank you very much, everybody. So I'm just going to take those questions now. Okay. Okay. Great. My goodness. Okay. Okay. Okay, guys, if there's any questions that you would like to ask, for those who are shy, I have to say that during this period of the MCO, the introverts have really thrived because there's no expectation to have big groups of human connections. Those with social anxieties have also actually done really well. But at the same time, I know some of you, I don't know, might have or might not have any questions. If not, if yes, we will take some. If not, then I'll just let it go back to Amira.
Yeah, thanks, Prof. Ame. Actually, I think there are two questions in here. So if you allow me, maybe I can just read them out for you. Okay. So the first question is asking, okay, Dr. Ame, do you think we need to say managing stress, or should we say coping with stress? Is that more apt? And the person is asking this because we are managing something that is near and dear to us, such as bank balance, health, and wealth, which mean a lot to us, whereas stress, I guess, is not really something that's near and dear to us.
Wow, this is the problem talking to academics. Even the word becomes a conscientious point. I agree with you. Probably it's going to be coping with stress. I think what's more important is for us to take on board that stress has its positive and negatives. That there are many causes of stress that might be not even related to us. We might be doing quite well, but the environment itself, like what's happened with COVID, right? It's not that we're not able to manage it, but the situation has just changed overnight. Literally, all your dreams and aspirations in 2020 has just gone off the window. But literally, yes, I do agree. It might be with coping with stress and managing the other elements that we can control. So what's the next question?
It is the condition where the uncertainty prevails, and that is the reason for the stress. I guess.
No, you're very right, Dr. Krishna, that it's
Yeah.
definitely the loss of control, and in this case, the loss of autonomy that we had as a result of being asked to be in a situation that we were not prepared for, which happened so suddenly that we didn't have time to actually plan at all. And I think this has caused a lot of stress, particularly to the system. And of course, as we get less and less information, what I didn't add on, I had a slide which somebody said was too easy, yeah? Which was actually an introductory slide to COVID. So if you look at the introductory slide and you think about the situation that we're in, there are just so much questions that made us so unprepared for the situation that we're in, which resulted in us feeling that stressful moment. And as we had less and less information because it's such a new situation that we're in, some of us actually started to have distress, and sadly, a very small amount of us actually were impaired. Yeah, that actually sought professional help. But most of us, if not all of us, were actually dealing with the negative aspects of stress, maybe around the yellow, if not orange zone, not really in the red zone, because of the situation that we're in. And I think this has not gone away because we know that post MCO, we're still going to be dealing with as I call it, the new norm. And there's so many changes that we're seeing even as academics, and how we're going to be doing our normal jobs, yeah, teaching and research in the present situation that we're in. So again, I think this is not yet over, and I think this is where it's important for us to be able to have more ability to cope, as our colleague has mentioned, or skill sets. The more repertoire of stress management skill sets that you have, the more likely that the coping mechanisms and skills will be more than the demands that we have. And that's why I put there in the specifics. I think adapting to new skills, and I do believe that you need to be almost like an actor now, apart from being a lecturer, because how do you engage 300 students on these online platforms, especially if you're using something like Google Meets where you can't see feedback? It's really challenging. You always have to imagine like you're in a studio or something. Similarly, if you're going to be doing mathematics, for example, I think mathematics, because the colleague is struggling trying to teach math. It's really fundamental math because sometimes they use that chalkboard thing, and there's none. And I know you've probably seen that video of a professor who gave a lecture for 1 hour without. I think he muted his screen, so he gave a 1 hour lecture without having any feedback. And then just finding out at the end that actually all the while people can't hear what you're saying, and he couldn't get the feedback because he was actually trying to do it on the chalkboard. So I think this is definitely going to be some of the issues.
Yeah,
Wow.
this is a condition called as being connected yet inconnected or unconnected.
It's true. It's true. So there's a colleague here, I think Dorothy DeWitts. She's asking, what would you do to help those who have developed OCDs and phobias towards getting infected? Okay, this is something that's been written in the New York Times, germophobia. Again, if you're having risk to develop obsessive compulsive disorder as a disorder itself, and you had some traits prior to this, we've noticed that there has been a little bit of an increase, particularly when we are expecting people to come back to work. I think if it's starting to impair you, it would be best to see somebody for this, because I think the stress management techniques that we've taught you just now might not just do it. If you're developing some level of germophobia, or the phobia of getting an infection, then again, what we've taught you just now and shared with you can still be used. But if you're really struggling to get your job done as a result of this irrational fear, then I think it'd be best, again, to seek some help from one of us. And again, you might not be seeing a psychiatrist, you might actually just need the help of a counselor or a psychologist, but at least you're getting your issues addressed. And again, these are going to be some of the issues that will come up moving forward as we all start to move back to normality. I'm predicting that this will definitely start to increase over time. Okay, there's a question by Suna Chin about kindly elaborating about mindfulness. So mindfulness is a specific form of psychotherapy that is actually used to manage stress, anxiety, and depression. It is a very useful form of psychotherapy, which fundamentally needs you to be present or to be present at this moment of time, wherever you are, to allow whatever is distressing you to play in your mind, but then eventually go away because you're focusing on the present, and to also include breathing as part of that particular exercise. So it's a technique on its own, but what I want to assure you is that it's easily learned, and there are lots of materials online that you can actually use to actually get a bit of an idea on it, and then you can modify it. You know, I've done one particular talk with Ken's Apothecary, the shop, the retailer, and we talked about using our five senses with mindfulness. Because if you're being present, and if you're focusing on the present, and you're using like aromatherapy, for example, it sort of allows you to zoom in into something because of the senses that or your five senses. So these are just some ways that you can actually modify mindfulness to assist in stress management. And also it might be something that you could do as a self-care routine as well for some of you here who might like candles and smells and what have you. Okay. What's the second question, Amira? Tadi I heard one question. Is there a second one dalam banyak-banyak?
Yes, I think there was a comment by Prof. Krishna again. It's in the middle. Yeah, so I'll just read it out for you. Dr. Ami, you've touched on everything that can be thought of. So he said, thanking you for that. Inactivity is most. And mostly we were not prepared for this situation, I guess. And we have become IT junkies now. And once the toys are taken away, we will have more stress. Very good presentation, and thank you.
I think Dr. Krishna, what we've learned, if you wanted to force people, if we had trouble in getting particularly people in my mom's age group who are still teaching, mind you, to be internet savvy, they've suddenly become internet gurus over the last 2 or 3 months. And I think this skill set is a useful skill set that all of us will carry forward. But I think we have to also take note, and I think I put there in survival one of the specific tips of being mindful not to spend too much time on the gadgets if you were not initially introduced to it. And that's why I purposely shared with you about my journey with Netflix. Yeah, I've purposely stayed away from Netflix as long as I could until somewhere along probably the third week of the MCO. It just got unbearable because people were sharing all these shows, and I thought I'll just have a look, yeah. And then now it's become a problem where we've got to sort of make sure that you time yourself in the kind of shows that you're watching. So I suspect most of us here are having that same problem as well.
Yeah, it leads to addiction.
Yes. I hope you haven't started the Korean dramas, Dr. Krishna, because that might be a problem.
No, not at all.
Perhaps, Prof. Ame, you could, from a psychiatrist, just advise everybody right now, do not start any Korean dramas.
Yeah, I purposely mentioned it because I've been hearing so many Korean dramas I never heard of before, but I've resisted not to watch them. Okay, great. Any last minute questions before we end? It's a Friday, we're all tired.
Okay, perhaps if I can ask one question. Prof. Ami, can you give maybe one piece of advice to those of us who may actually be overworked during the MCO because of additional responsibilities dealing with COVID-19 or MCO-related issues?
I think the first take home is that we are really in these are unprecedented times. So there's going to be a lot of changes that will happen, and the faster that we're able to adapt, the better. but at the same time reevaluate yourself. I did not put another slide on how do you evaluate your stress. So the most simplest way is just to use a Likert, 1 to 10, 5 being normal, 10 being extremely distressed, 1 being extremely not distressed, and just being honest with yourself and asking yourself where do you think you're sitting on that particular ruler. And if you think that you're consistently in the 7 and 8 zone, and you're starting to have, the symptoms that we shared with you just now, irritability, the physical symptoms, the emotional symptoms, and also the behavioral symptoms. Yeah, behavioral symptoms could be things like you're asked to do a task and you're reluctant to do them when you were previously quite enthusiastic to do them. You're not feeling that sense of joy anymore in doing them, and you're dreading being asked to do the things that you used to enjoy. You might be already hovering around the yellow and even orange zone. The red zone is mainly for us as managers, maybe to identify colleagues that suddenly become absent or suddenly becoming more absent than they normally are. And we need to find out and make sure that they get the support that they actually can get. So I think just identifying that and then putting in resources by yourself or asking for resources from your department or faculty or colleagues might also be able to do the trick. For some of us here who are managers, I just want to remind all of us here that we also have an obligation to assist our colleagues if they're struggling. And the easiest way to do that is just ask. People are willing to share with them if you ask, and you ask honestly and empathetically, because this is really an unprecedented times. As I've shared with you, the causes of stress could be various. It doesn't have to be that person. It could be his family, the situation that he or she is in. And I think having somebody to being able to at least you'll be able to ask, would be able to allow them to ventilate, and if they need further help, as I've shared with you, at least in University Malaya, there are already systems in place for us to assist these particular people and colleagues and staff for a better mental health and well-being in our workplace, at least. All right.
Thank you, Prof. Amit. That's really good advice for us, for ourselves, and also for us to look after our colleagues. So, well, I see if there are no further questions, and it is, as Prof. Ame said, getting towards the late evening on Friday afternoon. So, thank you so much, Prof. Ame, for taking this time to speak with us, both for the faculty. Mostly people here are actually from University of Malaya, those who have actually joined in, but using a different Google account. And I think there are also a couple of people who came in from outside of University of Malaya. So thank you, Prof. Ame, for spending your time and sharing your expertise and also the very, very simple tips to look after our mental health and well-being. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And we will see you again for further webinars at ADAC. Before you leave, please do kindly fill up our feedback form. We really appreciate the input and the feedback to help us improve and also to help us bring to you webinars that are relevant to your needs now. So once again, thank you, everybody, and have a good weekend, hopefully a restful weekend. Thank you, Prof. Amir.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Thank you to the speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.